Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be nurtured together. May we be nourished together. May we strive together. May our learning shine. Let this be another productive night. May we not quarrel with ourselves or with this teaching. Peace. So last week we have completed up to verse 4. And this week we will answer question 5 posed by Arjuna. And he asked, what is the significance of remembering Bhagavan at the time of death? And why should we do that? And how? Chapter 8 is unique because basically from verse 5, which we will begin, answers this question. So it's a significant topic. So therefore, chapter 8 is about another important sadhana in life, which is called Ishvara Upasana, which means meditating on God or contemplating on God. Ishvara Upasana is as important as Karma Yoga was between chapter 2 to 6, except that Karma Yoga is more for the active types who are very much looking to do something, and they sort of have this rajasic active lifestyle. And the rest of us who are more kind of introverted, we don't have to be out there. We don't have to practice Karma Yoga. We just don't resonate with Karma Yoga that much. For us, there is a different kind of sadhana called Ishvara Upasana. So it's more inwards, and Karma Yoga is more outwards. That's the difference. More for a mature mind that has gone more sattvic. It's got more sattva. And the prior mind, the Karma Yoga mind, is more rajasic. So I just want to give you a contrast difference. In the context of chapter 8, we're going to talk about meditating on Ishvara, because I said Ishvara Upasana, with attributes. This means with features, with color, with form, with qualities. For example, Ishvara is benevolent, compassionate, loving, kind, all-knowing, omniscient, omnipresent. All of these are attributes that we can put our minds onto. So right now, this should already answer the purpose of chapter 8, because some of us cannot yet put our minds on the formless. Like, what is there to turn my mind onto awareness? I can't do that. So therefore, chapter 8 is for those who are still struggling to grasp what is this nirgunam, what is this chaitanya, this consciousness. So therefore, you can see how we're slowly progressing. We're not jumping straight into consciousness like we would usually see in the spiritual marketplace. We have a very beautiful order. And so the word for this is saguna Ishvara. Saguna, we understand, with qualities, with guna, with sattva, rajas, tamas. So therefore, entire chapter 8 is about how to meditate on Ishvara with saguna, saguna with features. And this could be anyone who is close to you. It could be Rama Upasanam, it could be Buddha Upasanam, it could be Jesus Upasanam, it could be Krishna Upasanam, it could be Vishnu Upasanam, Shiva Upasanam, Ganapati Upasanam, whoever you feel close to, Upasanam. Okay, so it's not about giving you who to meditate on. It's about taking someone that you resonate with according to your culture, your background, and your personal preference, and then putting that to best use. So in summary, Ishvara Upasana is actually Saguna Ishvara Upasana. All clear? So we're not going to be speaking about consciousness and all that. This is about features. A mind which still demands to meditate onto something. So this is for you then, if that's the kind of mind that you have. And the question is, meditate when? Right, on this Ishvara, on this Bhagavan. And the answer is, throughout life and now, yes, including now, and in those final days when, it's pretty obvious that death is coming and the doctor doesn't report such good news, and usually we know, right? But sometimes we also don't know, which, for example, some people can get, a capillary in the brain, artery, blows up and they just fall into a coma. My grandfather actually died that way. He was just okay 1 second, next moment falls onto the ground. No time to prepare at all. Therefore, you can see the importance of having a pre-established practice so that when we do fall down into a coma, right, or into faint, then what takes over? The subconscious mind. Because then your willpower is not going to be functioning, is it? When a person is in bed, they don't know what to think about, but what's still operational? The subconscious mind. And how do you imprint those thoughts in the subconscious mind? By doing prior practice. Therefore, the question was, when do we meditate on Ishvara? The answer was now, for the sake of it being imprinted in those critical moments. So that's the logic why it is important. This Saguna Ishvara Upasana, this means meditating on God with features, is divided into two categories, into two types. And it depends on what is the motive of the person, what is their qualification, and how pure their mind is. So again, the two kinds that I'm going to describe now will depend on how pure your mind is, how qualified you are as a sadhaka, as a spiritual aspirant. So this is all relating to us, where we are in our state, in our spiritual journey. And the first type is Sakama Upasaka, or Sakama Upasana. Whenever I say the word Sakama, instantly in your mind should come up what? With desire. This includes dharma, artha, kama. In other words, everything in the world other than fourth purushartha, moksha. Everything in the world other than moksha. And the second type is nishkama upasana. And what is this one going to be? Someone tell me. Moksha. There's only one option, right? So this means the only reason why I live, for every breath that I get up and go to bed, is so that I can entertain thoughts of Ishvara, so that I can love Ishvara, so that I can contemplate on Ishvara. That is a second type, which is called Nishkama Upasana. I also said the word Upasaka. Now what's the difference? Upasaka is the one who does the Upasana. So therefore, Upasana means meditation or contemplation. Upasaka is simply a person who does that. Now, I'm going to give you the categories in a little bit more detail. First type, Sakama Upasana. In brackets, you can put world in summary. Anything about the world. This Upasana is about meditating on material benefits. Health, wealth, success, money, better relationships, just generally improving your experience in samsara, right? Modifying the world to suit my likes and dislikes. Through this category, we can also accomplish great powers, great siddhis. These are yogic powers that provide us certain benefits, and people are fascinated by these people, especially when there's a entity coming into this yogi, because they can channel certain beings, and it's like, wow, this is amazing. So a lot of people in this category get seduced by these siddhis, these powers, because the fact is you can develop these powers. But a lot of people get seduced by the fact that they can, and what happens? They start worshipping worldly material things for the sake of karma, dharma, and artha. In other words, I am able to read your mind. I'm able to predict the future. All this is possible. But for the sake of what? Worshipping material success. And therefore, the seduction of this category is very strong. So if you're a common man and you see a yogi with this power, then they will start to, entertain certain, they'll get into a trance, and you can ask them any question about your past, your present, your life, and it will be very accurate what they say. It will be unbelievably like, how is this possible? In fact, I did put up a video just to show you of this actually happening in real time, so that you can relate to it. And he's got a lot of good, interesting stuff to say. But this is what I'm trying to show you, is that these people do exist, and he even described his story. It's actually very interesting. He sat at a little seminar, and he wanted to channel spirits, and he felt something coming through him, and suddenly he closed his eyes, and all these words started coming out. And this was about 20 or 30 years ago. So he's got a lot of content out there, and and it's very fascinating. We're like, wow, I want to hear what another deity has to say, never mind people on earth. Right? So this is what I mean. Do not get seduced by this, because it is just another sakama upasana. It's more samsara, basically. Now, the second category is nishkama upasana. In this, we can put moksha, or liberation. God alone, that's it. And this upasana is practiced for the purpose of spiritual benefits. Whenever I say spiritual benefit, that means freedom from a sense of limitation, discovering one's true nature. And such a person will say something like, "Oh Lord, I am not interested in anything that is perishable in this world. I've seen enough. It all comes and goes. It all provides temporary pleasures, but then once I'm back home, I'm all back alone, wondering who am I, feeling empty. For that reason, I want nothing else except you alone. I want to," that's how they speak, "I want to merge with you." They still use these dualistic words, merge, come together, and it's fine, right? But, they're being sincere about that. So that's a nishkama bhakta, very mature mind. That means one who has seen enough in this world. It is all good, but ultimately it doesn't provide lasting fulfillment. So this is what the person has ascertained. In Sanskrit, we call this Ishvara Aikyam Prapti. This means attaining oneness or a union with Ishvara. Coming at one, being at one with the whole, with the total. And this second category, we're still on Nishkama Upasana, requires a great deal of vairagyam. Vairagyam, what does this mean? Okay, another word for it is dispassion from the need for things to be plus or minus. I have no need for them to be favorable or unfavorable. I let them be as they are. I have no need for worldly gains or losses. I am neutral towards both. So, vairagyam, I am value neutral towards worldly losses and worldly gains. $1 million, it's fine. It doesn't change me. I lose money, I lose this, I lose that, it's fine. It doesn't change me. So this is what the thinking is for Nishkama Upasaka. The other logic is, think about it this way. As long as, because I said you need dispassion. Now, as long as there are desires, is it likely that those desires will be put aside and the person will pursue Ishvara? Is that realistically likely? No. It's nearly impossible. Let's just be realistic. As long as there are desires, kamas, I will have the need to exercise them one way or the other. In other words, as long as I have kamas, I would then be going back to which category? Sakama Upasana. In other words, in order to go to the second category, I have to have done a great deal of contemplation, meditation, or karma yoga prior. Now, this second category, that is Nishkama Upasaka, can go two directions. The first is to practice this Nishkama Upasana for a long time. This means to meditate on Ishvara with attributes, features, because it is Saguna. Remember, the whole chapter is about Saguna. We're not talking about Nirguna yet. What's the purpose of this meditation lifelong? Because I said meditate for a long time. What does this do to the mind? Purifies the mind. It removes this excess rajas and tamas and puts enough sattva, or just, makes the mind as is. And the mind as is, what's its natural condition? Sattva guna. So, I said, practice long time for the sake of purifying the mind. After having sufficiently purified the mind, we'll pause there. Question, how do you know you have sufficiently purified your mind? What's the barometer for that?
Desires less.
Okay, good. Yeah, lack of wanting. The other is generally throughout life your mind is calm yet alert.
Yes.
Calm and alert, those two are the barometers of a sattvic mind. Sattvic mind is not a lazy mind who falls asleep. A sattvic mind is very alert, but it's calm. So I'm going to continue now. After having sufficiently done purification, stop. Now, why should you stop Saguna Ishvara Upasanam? Why did I say stop? The reason is because, or why should you drop the practice?
Maybe because...
Yeah, go.
Maybe because it's still a desire to want to...
Okay, I said purify the mind. This sounds like a qualified person. So why should a qualified person continue meditating on Ishvara with attributes? In other words, stop the sadhana because my mind is calm and alert, meaning what? I'm able to move on to Nirguna Ishvara Upasanam. And we also know what? That Saguna Ishvara is still empirical, transactional, vyavaharika reality. In other words, it is not the highest reality, it is still mithya. Question, what does the word mithya mean?
False.
Yeah. New definition is, whatever can be superimposed on the substance is mithya. For example, whatever can be superimposed on the original substance or the substance because of which that form has its existence is called mithya. This little pot is superimposed onto its substance because of which it enjoys its form and gets to call itself form. Because it does that, we call that mithya. So without the substance, there is no pot. So therefore, this reality is still vyavaharika. And the person realizes that it is not Paramam Aksharam Brahman, which remember this is chapter 8 called Aksharam Brahman, the highest reality. That is Aksharam, imperishable Brahman. So therefore it is still not Paramam Aksharam Brahman. It's not the greatest imperishable reality, and for that reason the Upasaka is now qualified for Nirguna Ishvara Upasanam, to meditate on the formless. Now, how do you meditate on the formless?
The abstract ideas.
We think about the qualities of Brahman. And you reflect on Brahman.
Okay. But
You can say he's
still
all-pervading. There's no, I know it's Nirguna.
Yeah. Any more ideas? How do you actually meditate? Because even thinking is another internal thought. I cannot objectify consciousness. So how do I meditate on awareness? Because awareness is always prior to whatever I try to do.
Stop thinking about your sense of whatever you're sensing through your senses. You don't have to think about it.
That's closer.
I think it's looking at the world,
Yeah.
seeing Brahman in everything around you.
That's much closer, yeah. And then let go of that idea. Because if I hold it in, I'm holding in what? An idea of, that means, as Paramarthananda would say, own up. Drop the idea. Once you learn how to drive a car Let go of the idea that you don't learn how to drive a car, because you know how to drive a car. Let it go. Now this owning up comes through time, because even to say own up, even that is another idea. But it's just a pointer to what it means to meditate on awareness. To meditate on awareness simply means I understand owning to the pure mind developed through Upasana or Karma Yoga. I understand that I am none other than Brahman. But it's not a verbalized saying, because to verbalize it is another objectification of consciousness. It's just an understanding that comes through time. Now the Upasaka is qualified for Jnana Yoga. Another name is Nirguna Ishvara Jnanam. That means knowledge of Ishvara without attributes. Another name is Para Prakriti Jnanam. In other words, knowledge of consciousness. And this Upasaka can do all of this Jnana Yoga, in which lifetime? This or the next lifetime? This lifetime. Therefore, because of their qualification, they attain Aparoksha Jnanam, direct knowledge, direct assimilated knowledge. We don't need to say moksha now, because Aparoksha Jnanam leads to moksha. How? What's the converter? What's the converting aspect from Aparoksha to moksha? Nidityasanam. This is called Jivan Muktaha, which means liberated while living. Summary. We start off as Saguna Ishvara Upasana, meditating on God with attributes. This converts to Jnana Yoga, owning to purified mind. So again, Saguna Ishvara Upasana converts to Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga is what? Shravanam, Mananam, Nidityasanam, and that leads to moksha. Now, the second path which this Nishkama Upasaka can go, they continue Saguna Ishvara Upasanam until last breath. Remember, the first category stopped. They dropped it. But this one, until last breath. So there's something going on here. What do you think that is? Why would I continue it to the last breath?
Because it's so enjoyable.
So they're sincere, remember? They're not trying to enjoy themselves or, ride off this, sort of glorification. There's something going on. They haven't purified their minds. Mind is still too rajasic or tamasic. In other words, they're allergic to nirgunam. How can I meditate on attributeless Brahman? How? Because my mind uses nothing but what? 5 senses. I need something to see, to hear, to smell, to touch. If I don't have those 5 senses, how can I meditate on imperishable, formless, nirguna Brahman? In other words, what kind of mind says this? One which is still gross. Therefore, a gross mind, a physical mind, can only relate to what?
Physical object.
Good. Physical, gross objects. That's just common sense. Gross identified mind can only see, can only relate, can only be drawn to, can only be attracted to gross 5 sensory inputs. And therefore, a subtle mind is naturally attracted to a subtle. That means only a subtle mind that is category 1 is able to go from Saguna Ishvara Upasanam to Nirguna Ishvara Upasana. Very good. She's from Chinmaya, right? Yeah. She's very qualified. Also, Krishna says in chapter 12, verse 5, Krishna admits, he says that appreciation of or inquiry into Nirguna Ishvara requires a very, very subtle intellect. Sukshma buddhi. He admits it. So therefore, if one is having trouble contemplating formless, don't be surprised. It needs a very qualified, very subtle intellect. And that takes a lot of work, a lot of upasana, a lot of dedicated, serious practice. Then the question is, what should this person do? Because they're serious, they also want moksha. Their eyes on God only, nothing else interests them. They're a mumukshu purusha, that means they are a person who is only interested in freedom from decay, freedom from matter, freedom from time, freedom from limitation, what should they do? Because they're honestly sincere, but they cannot move on to that which is required for liberation. And Krishna says there is a solution. Krishna's always got a solution. Now, we're not going to make you just walk out. Oh, what do I do? So, the first thing Krishna says is
Surrender to God.
surrender to God. Or in other words, continue surrendering with enthusiasm. Continue, keep that fire going until the last breath. Do not give up. So keep your enthusiasm going without a question. Maintain vairagyam. In other words, maintain this passion towards gains or losses in the world. He also says continue your saguna Ishvara Upasana throughout life. That means what? Continue being attached onto personal God with features. Why did I say attached? Because the mind is always attached onto something. And if it's not attached onto a personal God, what is it attached onto? Limited things, limited world objects. Therefore, the least the person can do is continue being attached to your Rama, Ganapati, Vishnu, Shiva, Jesus, Buddha, okay, whoever it is, continue being attached depending on your personal deity. We do not mind who it is. The point is, at least it represents, it symbolizes the infinite. That's the least that we can do. And then what will happen is, owning to my repetitive practice, owning to my repetitive abidance in my personal deity, at the time of death, Krishna says, you will indeed remember me. Why? Because you have been through habit, through practice, have been ongoingly thinking of me. And therefore, you have indeed died properly because you have thought of the most important in that most critical time before death. And before death, what will you think? Oh Lord, I only want moksha in the last final days. What does a worldly person think? Oh Lord,
Save me.
save me.
Give me an extra 5 minutes.
1 more minute, please. What's 1 more minute going to do? Seriously. Oh Lord, I hope my wife and children are okay. Who's going to take care of them? It's very sincere, right? But the point is, we're going to be asking, praying for other people. What Krishna is saying is, be praying for, be thinking of none other than that which symbolizes infinity. And now, after the body dies of this person, which we call Jivatma, which means transmigrating jiva. Now, Jivatma has a contextual definition. In one use, you can say Jivatma means the essence of the jiva is Atman. But the second definition of Jivatma means the jiva who identifies oneself as the body, mind, intellect, and doesn't know that its nature is Atman. Therefore, only to the avidya, ignorance of that fact, the jivatma travels. Specifically, what travels? The subtle body travels. Where? Brahmaloka. Now, we cannot prove that there is Brahmaloka. Some things we cannot prove, and we're not expected to. And we cannot verify of these lokas, of these worlds. But we can take the scriptures on the basis of faith, at least. Have you ever heard in English, seventh heaven? Why do we say that? What is this word seventh heaven referring to? Because, they're like in seventh heaven. Why number 7?
Day of rest.
Huh?
The day of rest.
Means Sunday?
Yeah, more examples?
Well, the chakra system, the 7th chakra is
Yeah,
the
good connection.
Is the universe.
Yeah.
Maybe the 7 heavens, I don't know.
Yeah.
7 stages of...
Yeah. See, we give away certain words and they go through our English use, but we never even inquire. What is 7th? Has anyone ever looked up what 7th heaven is? But we use it. So in the Islamic, Judaism and Christianity, there is levels, there are 7 levels of heaven. For example, in Islamic we call it 7 samawat, that's Arabic, for the 7th world. And the seventh, also in Christianity, is the seventh world where the Creator resides. Now, one thing that they did get incorrect is they call it the seventh abode of God. But you cannot particularize God to a location. Therefore, Advaita corrects it and says, the seventh abode of whom? Brahmaji. In other words, the creator of the universe. And the Vedas also have a model of the worlds. That is the 7 higher worlds and the 7 lower worlds. The other religions, they only talk about the 7 higher, but we talked about the 7 higher and the lower. In fact, I do have a...
Does the number show the distance? Like those digits are the distance from...
What's the number?
Kilometers.
Light years, right. We'll talk about the years. We'll talk about the years later. I'm talking Yuga, but I'm not going to get into that now. So from the earth, from the Buddhaloka, we got 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Brahmaloka is number 7. That means the 7th abode of the Creator. So what Krishna says is, after the person has thought of me, done a lot of upasana, and said, honestly, I want nothing but liberation, then what happens is the person goes to Brahmaloka and gains the knowledge through Brahmaji, and this we call Krama Mukti. That means enlightenment or freedom after death. So often we think, freedom after death, the moment the person dies, they're enlightened because they suddenly realize they're not the body. No, there's a certain process that the Vedas describe. Now, chapter 8 is about this Krama Mukti. What do you think this is for? Backup plan. In case we don't get moksha on earth, then what is the backup plan? We're going to now talk about that. So, summary of what I've said so far. Saguna Ishvara Upasanam turns into the second path, which is remember God at time of death, then visit Brahmaloka and gain self-knowledge there. So chapter 8 is how to attain moksha after death. Chapter 9, 10 onwards is how to attain moksha while living. Krishna is pointing out the most important thing to keep in mind is do not postpone this until last death. Do you know why? Do not something, I'm going to go for the backup plan, I'm just going to, mess around in the world, right? Because you do not know how death is going to approach us. Therefore, we have no time to prepare. For example, a car accident. Everything's fine one moment, the next moment. What do we usually think when we go home? About worldly things. So in other words, what am I thinking about before death? What someone said at the job. Thinking about sakama, more worldly things, more apara prakriti, more matter. And suddenly car crash. One little capillary in the brain blows up, the person's instantly in a coma. They have no time to prepare. So the primary advice is follow nishkama upasana, which means focus on God 24/7 to gain atmajnanam in order to attain liberation while living. Okay, that's the most safe solution that we have. Okay, now verse 5 together. Antakale chamam eva smaran muktva kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayaha muktva kalevaram yah prayati. Dropping the subtle body, the nishkama upasaka departs. Now the word yaha refers to nishkama upasaka or nishkama upasana. In other words, the person who has admired or meditated upon Ishta Devata for most of the time and who practiced meditation on God with attributes as priority in life. That one is what Yaha is talking about. Such nishkama upasaka that I just described departs. Not just the person who, messed around in the world and they just talking about someone who has done the work. So someone who is sincere, a sincere spiritual seeker. This means the Jivatma, as I said before, leaves the gross body, the Sthula Sharira, and travels. Now, how come we don't see them traveling? Can I see your thoughts right now? What is it that departs? The Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. Okay, what will happen to this Nishkama Upasaka at the time of death? Mam Eva Smaran. He or she will be remembering me. Then what happens? Madbhavam Yati. And attains my nature. In other words, goes to Brahmaloka, attains self-knowledge, and is privileged to Krama Mukti, liberation after death. And then Krishna makes a promise and says, Nasti yatra samshayaha. Na asti yatra samshayaha. No doubt about this Krama Mukti. He, she will come to me. So Krishna is making a promise here. A promise of Ishvara. Therefore, it's not a joke. Dropping the body at the time of death, one who departs remembering me alone, that is Ishvara, attains my nature. There is no doubt in this regard. Okay, now verse 6. Yam yam va pismaran bhavam tyajat yante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Suppose that a person does not remember God at the time of death. Remembers something else. There's no will to think strong. So it's a possibility. So I'm going to do a little diagram to, as Martin said, reincarnation on the basis of what? What I'm going to describe now is how is it that one life carries on to the next. Suppose we have 2019 and 2020. Okay. Now, suppose you run a business. At the end of the year, what do? Calculate our profits and losses. So at the end of the year, the last month, we do what? Profits and losses on the basis of what we have done in the 11 months of the year. So if I messed around, then I'm going to get a minus. If I did the right work, if I provided a service, took care of the customers, if I was onto it, then what's going to happen? I'm going to have a net income, a net profit. Is this where it stops? New Year's coming.
That's the retained earnings.
I have to then carry the result of either minus or plus where into the next year. So here we have a fresh year, a value neutral year, influenced by what? How much punyam or papam, how much good work or irresponsible work or responsible work I have performed last year in the last segment. In the same way, when a baby gets born, it carries over what? How much punyam or papam it has done on the basis of the work that it put in, where in its entire life from the beginning to the last breath. And it simply carries this forward. And then it has to exhaust the karmas through the times. So that's a very simple example to show us that there is no such thing as starting fresh. You heard that? Let's start fresh. Because who's actually starting? I am, you are. But this person who is starting carries a certain personality, a certain predisposition, a certain trait with them. And this trait will indeed influence what happens in the next continuity, in the next sequence of events. And now Krishna replies and says, the person's next birth will be shaped depending upon what was remembered at the time of death. Shaped. Just like the new year is shaped according to what I've done in the last year. Same principle. Or just like before you go to sleep, suppose we have an argument. It's someone close to us or a family member. And we think, I'm just going to resolve this tomorrow. And now we go to sleep. Are you fresh tomorrow? No. You know what happens? There is a continuity on the last thought that I implanted before sleep yesterday. Therefore, tomorrow will be a flavor of yesterday. And you know how long tomorrow takes to flush out the yesterday? It's not just about 10 minutes, wake up, carry on with day. No, it continues, it integrates, it entwines with what? The entire day, and it takes hours to flush it out. In the same way, when some people are born, they need to flush out last year, last life. That's why we have different births, unfortunate births, born in certain unfortunate situations. What am I doing? I'm flushing out all of the papam that I produced in the last life. So this should answer now, but what about, children who are born with, disabilities and unfortunate, they get raped very small. What about all that? Very simple answer. Whatever I have done in the previous year, in the previous, whatever losses or gains I've gotten is what I carry over to the next life. So therefore we can ascertain this karma, we ascertain why the world is in the way that it is so. Without karma, it is very hard to explain this to a person, because often they will say, yeah, but what about these unlucky kids? And they will often get angry when they ask these questions, because they say, how dare you talk, so it's all butterflies and rainbows, but there are people suffering. Answer on the board. And this also brings up a very powerful law, which says, as a person thinks, so a person becomes. Summarizes that on the board.
So you could incarnate as a different species.
Yeah, 84 lucky species, depending upon the mixture of the punyam and papam.
Can evolve and devolve.
Yeah, evolve and devolve. We don't agree with this Darwinian evolution of your continuity of evolution. It depends on your punyam and papam. That's how the person takes on a specific form depending on the totality of their karma. Now this law, which says, as a person thinks, so they become. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we have a formula, and it goes like this. TH, thoughts, influence, words, influence action, influence habit, influence character, influence or shape destiny. In other words, it goes like this. Watch your thoughts because it influences your words. Watch your words because it influences your actions. Watch your actions because it builds habit. Watch your habits because it develops your character, your personality, who you are. Pleasant or unpleasant depends on this character. Watch your character because it defines your destiny. In other words, when we say the person is pleasant or unpleasant, what are we actually saying? The person is repeating certain habits over and over and over again on a daily basis. Why are they doing that? Because they are doing actions which correspond or which generate this habit. And why are they doing these actions? Because they are speaking in accordance that assume these actions. And why are they speaking like that? Because they are thinking on a daily basis in a certain way, which causes them to speak in a certain way, which causes them to act in a certain way, which causes them to express repetitive habits in a certain way, which causes them to be a certain person. And therefore, the person's destiny is shaped because of thoughts. In other words, our destiny, your destiny, my destiny, is already being molded or shaped by what? By the very thoughts that we are entertaining when? Tomorrow or right now?
Right now.
Right now. So therefore, if you want a happy face in this little destiny box, then what do? Apply corresponding thoughts according to Shastra. Because the Shastra tells us how to live in order to create a pleasing destiny leading to moksha. Okay? If I follow thoughts according to money, then my destiny is going to have a lot of dollars called Sakama Upasana, but it's not going to lead to liberation. So it all depends on what thoughts we are entertaining. All we have to be concerned of is what thoughts are we putting into our heads every day. Not once in a while, once a week, but every day. Also in the Mundaka Upanishad, there is a statement that says, with whatever desire of object or environment a person dies in, okay, so a person dies in a specific environment with certain objects, then he or she will find himself in that setup with that environment and with that object. So this means how a person dies, in what kind of environment they die, with what kind of objects in their head they're thinking of, they will find themselves in that setup when the reincarnation continues. So you say, give me an example.
If someone's drowning and they're imagining a life raft and desiring,
Yeah.
they're born in a survival situation with sort of refugee campus.
Yeah, good. That's a good example. Another example is we got from the Bhagavatam, Jada Bharata. So here we have a honest ascetic who is sincere about his spiritual progress, and he is genuinely noble. So he goes to the forest for peace and meditation, and he spots a very cute deer. And this deer becomes dear to him. Yeah. So he takes care of this deer, and the deer grows up. So this means he could have let the deer go. But because he was so kind, gentle, attached, he didn't let this deer go. He kept it in his little, near his hut. So when the final moments came, then he started getting worried. Who's going to take care of this deer? So, first lesson, before we say that he dies and gets reborn as a deer, we're going to put something in between there. Because you heard this before. Whatever we are attached to, knowingly or unknowingly, is what we think about when we are most vulnerable, most weak, most fragile. Now at death, are you strong? Are you like up there, or are you vulnerable?
Most strong.
Very vulnerable. In other words, the first thing the mind is going to fly to in those critical moments is what it has been attached to for most of its life. In Jada Bharata's case, despite his sincere efforts to attain liberation, his mind was attached to the deer, and he was vulnerable. Therefore, the mind's nature is to what? Always grasp onto something, an object, out of the five senses. In this case, it grasped onto the deer, therefore he became a deer to some other person to whom this deer was now dear to. In the Bhagavad Gita language, Krishna is going to say, Tyajat yante kalevaram. In other words, when the person gives up the body at the time of death, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, and remembers various worldly objects or goals. In other words, when a person gives up the body at the time of death and remembers certain worldly objects or goals, tam evaiti kaunteya, she will attain at birth corresponding to the thought process that was entertained at the time of death. So whatever thought process was going on at the time of death, there will be a correlative life, a correlative birth, a correlative form, a correlative environment to that thought process. In other words, such a condition that person attains. We have to address the possibility of cheating. Because some of us think now, hey, what if I mess around in the world and then I only think about God in those critical moments? Right? What if I just sort of get whatever I want and I continue this life of luxuries and enjoyments? And you know, when the doctor announces that I've got 4 more months or whatever it is, or it's quite clear that due to age, I should start worrying about God, only then I start entertaining this. Bhagavan says that is impossible. That's not going to work. And he gives 2 reasons why we cannot cheat the system. The first reason is because we don't know the exact day, the exact month, the exact hour, and the exact second of our death. Therefore, there is no time to prepare. Now, I said exact second. Suppose you knew the exact second. Do you know why that's not going to work, even if you knew the few seconds when I'm going to die? Okay. How long can you hold the thoughts in your mind without it swaying from left to right?
You look at your watch.
Yeah. Already it's modified into something. We can't even hold the thought for more than 5 seconds. Very hard. So therefore, even if I knew the exact 30 seconds of death, it's not going to work. We also don't know the circumstances which will define death. We don't know how it's going to happen. As I said, it could be something that is, it could be old age. It could be a car, some kind of an accident, or a sudden coma, a sudden fainting. Or if you're in India, then, it could be the crazy water lorries, they just boom, or the auto rickshaw drivers or something. We don't know. So the point is, we don't know when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. And the second reason is because subconscious habitual patterns always win out over deliberate conscious thoughts. Always. So, thoughts are invoked how? 2 ways. Number 1, by willpower. I intend to think, therefore I think. We do this all day. I intend to fill up the car petrol, therefore I do so. That is by what? By will. And the second way is by and through vasanas or karma or samskaras. In other words, habitual patterns based on past conditioning. How have I been thinking before is going to dictate what kind of thoughts I think in the moment. So therefore, that is also a constant clash between what? Willpower and subconscious thoughts. Example, you sit down for meditation. What is our conscious will saying? Saguna Ishvara Upasana. Like, I want to meditate on my personal deity. But what is your vasana saying? I want to go to sleep, right? I want to eat. Oh, what about that conversation I just had with my colleague? I need to address that. What day is it today? Right? It just comes out of nowhere. In other words, it's a constant clash between conscious will and subconscious habitual thoughts. But there's something more to it. You know in your own experience that the older we get, what happens? The less conscious will has strength, and what has more strength? Vasanas. Why? 30 years of momentum of thinking in a certain way is going to be a lot stronger than thinking 5 years in a certain way. That's just common sense. The older we get, the more habituated we think according to how we have thought before. So therefore, age does not do us any advantage. So, summary, realistically, it is impossible to control our thoughts through conscious will. Realistically. You can say it is possible, but realistically for most of us, it's just owing to the circumstances, it's not, forget about it. Especially when the mind is vulnerable and ill. That's the last time that see, when we're sick, do you have any motivation to think big thoughts let me think about innovation? Huh? What happens? We just sort of go inwards. And what do we start thinking about? Our habitual thoughts. So now Krishna says there is a solution to this. Your vasanas should be godly vasanas. That means they should be oriented how? Thinking of God, entertaining thoughts of God, loving thoughts of God, and never stop saturating your mind with such thoughts. How? Read the Shastra a little bit each day. Something. Classes are very good for that reason. That's why we have the classes, not just for, come here because there's nothing else to do. Because classes work very well. There's a connection, there's a direct environment, and it works very well. And so then what happens is, owing to the repetition, then even if a person falls into a coma, only to the subconscious repetitive prior thoughts, then when there is no conscious will in coma or in the hospital, what is the subconscious mind entertaining? Thoughts of personal deity, thoughts of God. Therefore, the person's very safe. They have done the work prior, so therefore they can feel assured at those critical moments. So in other words, start your death rehearsal today. That's what we're speaking of, death rehearsal. Question is now, how do I know what is inside my subconscious mind? How do you know whether your subconscious mind is already godly oriented or not?
Depend on how peaceful you are.
Yeah, very good. That's in the waking state, very good. Another very easy way, proven way, is through dreams. Because in dreams we are completely identified with the sukshma sharira, with our minds. We completely go inwards. So this is where the power of remembering dreams comes. Now, two things to improve dream recall. One, have a piece of paper and a pen and never be tempted to not write, because we know how it is. Oh, this is totally irrelevant. You know, it's too short, like one little thing. But the thing is, you'll find even if you write the smallest thing, that's going to somehow make you remember the dream next time longer, because you're telling your mind what? Indirectly, that this is worth remembering next time. So the act of writing down, I'm telling my mind indirectly, you better remember this next time so that I can write something more. The other very easy way to remember your dreams is like this. Get up at some time throughout the night, about 5 minutes or 3 minutes, have like a thermos bottle next to your bed with some hot water, and go back to sleep. Instant dream recall. We often do not remember our dreams. Why? Because we go through 8 hours of so many ups and downs, that REM. But if you wake up and as you go to sleep, you'll find that immediately the mind goes into dream state. And because it is so fresh, it's able to then remember. So try that out. It's very easy to remember it that way. So,
You mean put an alarm on in the middle of the night?
yeah.
Wake up.
Yeah.
But then just go back to sleep.
Yeah, some hot water, maybe go to the bathroom, right? And then go back to sleep. Don't go too long, because then you're not going to be able to fall asleep again, right? So if you're drowsy, like, yeah, and go back to sleep, fantastic, okay? But the point is to wake up and then go to sleep. Just try that out and see if you get any recalls. And if you do remember your dreams, and you do remember that every single dream contains something that is Vedantic, something that is godly related, then you have a subconscious mind which has imprinted its habits according to actions, according to words, according to thoughts. In other words, your subconscious will be a big revealer of how well you are established in this knowledge.
Does that suggest that if you're able to lucid dream and bring in Krishna or whoever, the deity, and bring them in to, I don't know, neutralizing the bad experience or contributing to it, if you're able to lucid dream, I would suggest that sounds like a way to...
Yeah, that's a skill to develop now. That takes way too long to develop. It's much easier just to remember the dreams. Because see, you're not trying to now, go play with the world. You're just trying to discover what's in here. And sometimes when people have these experiences, like through psychedelic journeys, they take medicine. They call it, plant medicine. Also, that's another way to reveal directly what happens, what's inside the person's mind. Some of them go crazy, and then they blame the plant, but that's not the case. They just simply revealed the deep-seated, deep-rooted samskaras which have not gotten a chance to express themselves. So I do not recommend the substances, I only recommend dreams, because it is so easy to actually remember dreams. We just don't try. That's why we don't know. Arjuna, at the time of death, remembering whatever thing one gives up the physical body, having thought about it always, one reaches that alone. Verse 7 together. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yutyacha mayarpita mano buddhihi Mam evaishyasya samshayam sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara. Arjuna, may you always remember me, then the subconscious will be saturated with thoughts of me at the time of death. Now, objection comes up. If I remember Ishvara all the time, then how am I supposed to remember about my family duties, about work, about kids, about survival, money, about genuine worldly needs? If I'm constantly thinking about Ishvara, how is that supposed to work and come together in harmony without any conflict? Do I just drop my duties, become a sannyasi? Krishna is going to say, I never asked you to drop your duties or your responsibilities or your worldly activities at any time. In fact, you have to continue them also. That word also is the important. Not, just that or just moksha, but also. Therefore, you have two duties in life. One, spiritual pursuit, and two, worldly duties. Also because Krishna knows that Arjuna is trying to escape the war. And in other words, the war is a representation for swadharma. So Arjuna doesn't want to do his personal duty. So Krishna immediately follows the word with yutyacha. You also have to fight. Now the word fight, unfortunately, is misinterpreted as an official war. And it turns off a lot of people from ever pursuing Gita, but these are just symbolic meanings. In this case, the fight is a symbol of swadharma, or another word is anushtanam, which means undertaking or carrying out. So what am I carrying out or what am I undertaking? My personal duties, your personal duties, pertinent to your environment, your family, your situations. So may you follow or may you fulfill your duties also. Remember, just being born on earth, you are obligated to do your duty. Since we were too lazy for moksha in the last life, we have an obligation to the whole in order to keep running the society. Otherwise, the society crashes. See, we cannot just go and stand apart from the society and say, let the society run. You are part of the society. So therefore, we do have indeed a swadharma to uphold and be an example for the society as to how to be an honest, compassionate, understanding, patient person. So again, I'm going to bring up the question. How can we do the job simultaneously? That is, pursue Ishvara and do our worldly duties. We still haven't answered the question. For example, suppose you ask someone, hey, where are you from? Om Namah Shivaya. Are you a sannyasi? Om Namah Shivaya. Where are you going? Om Namah Shivaya. Would you like some food? Om Namah Shivaya. Right? Because it's a valid example because the person's got 24/7 focus on God, therefore he's not even responding to questions. Is this what we do? Okay, I'll give you a metaphor. Suppose that we are all on a bus tour and the bus stops. You know how they stop to show us around? And the coach says, get back in 2 hours. So we get off. What do? We socialize, we play, we visit the temple, we take pictures. But through all of that activity, in and through every single activity that we do, what's in our back of our minds?
Back of the mind, you have to get back.
Get back on the bus, otherwise trouble. There's consequences. In other words, every single whistle, every single horn, every single person that's looking at us reminds us of what? I'm being called to go back to the bus. You know, when someone looks at you, it's almost like, are you telling me that I need to go back? In other words, we start interpreting everything as a signal to get back onto the Vedanta bus, onto the bus of Ishvara. So in other words, despite doing our activities, enjoying our duties, fulfilling our worldly activities, Why are we thinking about the bus all the time, despite being able to successfully pull off worldly activities? What makes us think about the bus? Value. I've established value onto what the bus means for me. Therefore, there is contextual relevance. I've developed relevance towards the object, that is the bus, and I know what it means, what the bus means, on the basis of what? Of how important it is. So therefore, transferring this to Ishvara, I need to what? Convert that example and establish the value. What is the value of constantly thinking 24/7 on Ishvara? What does that mean to me? And what does that mean in the big picture? So therefore, this kind of thinking causes us to constantly prioritize Bhagavan in our life, despite attending successfully to our worldly duties. What kind of thinking? Thinking of value. Because often the mind is conditioned to think how? What is the value in the world? So we need to start training it. What is the value of remaining on this path until the last breath? So in summary, while amidst the world, stubbornly refuse to get off the self-knowledge bus. Why does I say stubbornly? Because we're often stubborn to get off our addictions. We don't want to get off our worldly desires. So we all are very good experts at being stubborn. So convert that stubbornness and refuse to get off the path of Ishvara. Whether that is Saguna or Nirguna, I do not know, that only you know that, but refuse to get off that bus until the last breath. Now, Mayi Arpita Mano Buddhihi. Learn to emotionally depend on and be attached to your Saguna Ishvara. So, who is your personal deity? I do not know, but you do know. Learn to be attached to and emotionally depend on that deity. Why? Because we cannot depend on a mortal human being, because they are unpredictably unavailable. We do not know when they will go. Therefore, why should I then depend on a mortal human being when I could depend on that one who has been taking care of me from the beginning, who is going to grace me with moksha? So therefore, change the focus. Now, question, how do you depend on God? How do you get emotionally attached to God? Answer, read the Shastra. When we meet a partner, at the beginning, we're not very attached, are we? How do we get attached to someone? The more time we spend with them, the more we get attached to them. The more time I spend with the Shastra, with Vedanta, the more I am attached to, dependent on the infinite principle. And also, learn to have intellectual conviction onto your Saguna Ishvara. How do you get intellectual conviction towards Ishvara? When you put a picture of your Ishta Devata or a symbol, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, then start to recognize how the actual infinity is not in the form, but the form represents the infinity. So in other words, I'm looking at this picture and I'm inquiring, what does it mean? What are they representing? So I'm going through an inquiry process in my mind. And by that, I'm spending time to inquire on attributes of Ishvara. That's why we call it Saguna Ishvara Upasanam. But you need something, because remember, we're talking about a mind that only relates to form. A mind is not yet primed to think about or to abide as Nirguna. So, summary. When you are able to appreciate the abstract truth, that is Nirguna, then meditating on God with features becomes optional. Even Shankara, he was still very devoted to personal deities, but it's optional. Now, how do you know you're ready to move on? That you no longer need to participate in Upasana with features. How do you know you're ready to move on? What's the barometer?
You see God in everyone.
Excellent. And suddenly there is less need to look at pictures, to entertain features. You can't help it. Suddenly you're like, but what's the point? you know, it's just pixels, it's just, you know, whatever I look, it's the same principle. So this comes naturally. So therefore the attraction towards this naturally subsides. That's how you know your mind is purifying, and that's how you know you're able to drop the Saguna Ishvara and turn your attention on Jnana Yoga, entertaining thoughts pertaining to Nirgunam. Mam eva eshyasi. If follow this lifestyle, you will attain me definitely. That's Bhagavan's promise. Now, one little note is we often box people into the skeptic's box, because every person at some point in life has had a broken promise. Someone made a promise to us and they didn't fulfill it. And then we learned to be skeptical towards people. We learned to not trust people. And we often even place Bhagavan in the same box. Do not do this, because Bhagavan is all knowledge, all power. A human being can make a mistake, that's understandable, because we don't have the total knowledge. But Bhagavan, the one who is Sarvam Jnanam, Sarvam Shakti, cannot make such an error. In other words, Krishna, representing Ishvara, is saying, if you follow this lifestyle, you will definitely attain me. Mam eva eshyasi. That is his promise. In other words, don't put Lord in the container of human beings. You know, they often say that politicians are the ones who shake your hand before election, but they shake your confidence after the election. Right? So Bhagavan is not this category. So be careful not to place him and go, yeah, but how can I trust this? Sometimes we just need to have faith. Therefore, remember me all the time and fight. In other words, and do your swadharma as is required from all of us. With your mind and intellect fixed upon me, you will attain me alone doubtlessly. Just like when we fix our minds on something worldly for a while, after a while we gain exactly that. So, in the same manner, we can use that same intellect, same mind to fix it onto the infinite. Therefore, we gain the infinite. We are privileged to the infinite. Abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partanu chintayan. At the time of death, the Saguna Upasaka remembers Ishvara, owing to the past works which they have performed. Now, what type of Ishvara? We will ask, and Krishna is going to say, Paramam Purusham Divyam. The Lord, which is the highest reality, who is known as Purushaha. What does Purushaha mean? Two definitions. The first is the one who resides in the heart of all. That is the indweller of all. If you want more scientific language, the one who resides in your body and mind. Just like, for example, a Vyashti Purushaha is residing in all the roles that they play. So if you're a father or a mother right now, or if you're a son or a daughter, is anyone not in these categories that I just described? Is anyone not a human being? Okay. Tell me this. Are you in the father role that you play?
Yeah.
Are you in the mother role that you play?
Yeah.
Are you in the employee role that you play?
Yeah.
Are you in the employer role that you play? Are you in the son role that you play? Are you in the daughter role that you play? So what's common here? The you. What is this you? Purushaha. What is changing? The different roles. So therefore, on the microcosmic scale, the Vyashti Purushaha is the one who is the indweller of all of the roles. On the macrocosmic scale, the Samashti Purushaha is the indweller of the entire universe, of every single individual. And the second definition of Purushaha is one who populates or fills up the world, the Jagat, with all knowledge, all power. Just like you populate a piece of land with what? Your knowledge, your power, called a house. Therefore, we build a house. Or you populate your kitchen with what? Spices and different foods. Based on what? The knowledge and the power that you have. In the same way, the Purusha is the one who populates the entire universe with spices, with herbs, with trees, with organs, with birds, with butterflies, with everything. So in other words, the second definition is the all-pervading indweller who is Paramam. Paramam means the absolute or the greatest. And then Divyam is referring to Chaitanya Swarupam, meaning whose nature is consciousness. So what Krishna just answered is the absolute Purusha whose nature is consciousness. Therefore, that's the definition. And what type of mind remembers Bhagavan at the time of death? Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena. In other words, the mind which is endowed with the strength, with repetition, with rehearsal, and which is Nanyagamina, undistracted. And with such a mind, which is endowed with strength, rehearsal, and is undistracted, the Saguna Upasaka remembers or attains me alone. Therefore, we're talking about the mind who is undistracted by worldly things and who has focused most of its life on Ishvara. That mind remembers and attains me. What is this me? Infinity, limitlessness, Satchit Ananda. For example, Ramanujan, if you know, one of the greatest mathematicians. Okay, so Ramanujan was in a hospital. He was ill because he came to Britain. And obviously the Indian weather is hot, and then Britain, it was cold. So he got very ill. And he was in the hospital visited by his friend Hardy. And Hardy said, I'm sorry for being late. I caught the taxi 1729 on the license plate. It's just a plain number. And Ramanujan replied, how? Oh no, it's not just an ordinary number, 1729. It is the smallest number expressible as the sum of two cubes in the two possible ways. So in other words, Ramanujan was ill, was vulnerable, was weak, in the hospital, and all he heard was 1729, and he discerned three facts out of this number. It's the smallest possible number. Second, the sum of two cubes. Third, expressible in two different ways. Now, how did he do this?
Constantly he was into maths. Yeah.
Because he consistently did prior Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena in his life, so therefore the mind naturally, spontaneously performed that same action when he is most vulnerable. Therefore, whatever the mind loves the most is what it spontaneously goes to when it is the weakest, when it is the most fragile, when it is the most vulnerable. Because we're attached to it. That's what we've been doing so long. That's what the mind knows only to past prior rehearsal, prior effort, prior repetition. So in the same way, if we learn to love Bhagavan, that is in this chapter context, Saguna Ishvara, that means God with features, with form, with attributes, then when we are most vulnerable, we automatically take refuge in that Bhagavan who, at the most critical time, by remembrance of him, we attain him. In other words, we attain or merge with the total. Or at least if we don't, I'm not saying now you're going to go, Brahmaloka guaranteed, because for that you need tons of Upasanam. But at least we're going to what? Implant the right thoughts for the next life to continue. So we're increasing our chances. So finally, the takeaway message is of today, as the person thinks, so the person becomes. In other words, if I think limited desires, I get in response a limited instrument suitable to perform or enjoy those limited desires. I don't need an unlimited instrument to enjoy limited desires. So, I think limited, I get limited. Whereas if I think unlimited Ishvara, then one regains long lost forgotten glory as limitless Brahman. So therefore it is all up to you whether we think on a daily basis of limitation, worldly successes, or that because of which this entire world enjoys its existence, which is none other than Bhagavan. O Arjuna, constantly thinking of the Lord with a mind that is undistracted due to the practice of meditation, one attains the divine supreme, the Lord. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.